But I want to talk really quickly with you about one of the really cool sources that I came across when trying to find out when they spoke the name and when they didn't speak the name. We established in the first century the priests were speaking the name of the temple. There's no question about that. There's definitive proof for that. What about the multitudes? What about the simple people? That's what I wanted to know. Did they speak the name in earlier times? And I came across a really interesting source, which was a letter written in Paleo-Hebrew. In fact, here is the letter. This is what it looks like. This is a letter from Lachish, which is the second largest, or in ancient times, it was the second largest town in the Judean kingdom of Judah. And in the Lachish letter, there's a series of letters. Let's go back to the previous slide. Actually, let's go away from the slides for a second. Let me tell you what the Lachish letters are. There are a series of letters written by this field officer who was the officer in charge of an observation post out in the Judean hills, and his name is Hoshayahu, which is a really interesting name because Hoshayahu means Yehovah save. It comes from the same root as Yeshua, which means, actually Hoshayahu and Yehoshua are the same exact name, just backwards. Hoshayahu means Yehovah save, and he's writing these reports back to his commander whose name is Yeush, which interestingly means despair. And he's writing to the commander all kinds of things that are happening. He's writing about how we see the signal fires and all kinds of interesting things. And these letters were discovered in Lachish. They were sent to his commander Yeush, and Yeush kept them in his personal archive. And when Lachish fell, these letters were preserved. And one of the letters is Hoshayahu's response to the accusation by his commander that he was illiterate. And I can imagine, we don't know exactly how it came up that he was accused of being illiterate, but it probably went something like this, that an order was sent by was sent to Hoshayahu by his commander, and Hoshayahu didn't follow the order, and the commander must have written something to him to the effect of, "What's the matter? Can't you read letters?" Right? I gave you an order and you didn't follow it. What's the matter? Can't you read? And here is Hoshayahu's response to that accusation. He says as follows, "Concerning that which my Lord said, you do not know how to read letters. As Yehovah lives, no man has ever tried to read a letter to me. And indeed, I read every letter that comes to me, and I furthermore pay attention to it." He's insisting that he's literate, he could read and he can write, which is very interesting, because if you would have gone to an ancient Canaanite in this period, or an ancient Babylonian, an ancient Assyrian, and gone to one of the field officers, in fact, you could go to the Egyptian army today to some of the field officers, and the Syrian army for sure, and they can't read and write. The commanders on top, they can read and write, but the simple little, lieutenants and, lower officers, they can't read and write. And this man is insisting, no, I can read and write. No one's ever tried to read a letter to me. I'm literate, as Yehovah lives. Now, what's interesting is that he says, as Yehovah lives. Now, how do I know that he actually said those words? Maybe he actually said, as Adonai lives, but he wrote it as Yehovah. How do I know? And remember, I'm the Litvak. I want definitive evidence and proof. And when we look at the actual letter, here's what we see. We see here, he says, this is a chet, say chet, yud, hey, vav, hey. And those, yud, hey, vav, hey is the name of the creator. The chet there is the chet of the word lives. And the phrase, as Yehovah lives, which appears 44 times in the Hebrew Bible, that's the standard vow formula or oath of ancient Israel. It's the phrase chai, Yehovah, say chai, Yehovah. As Yehovah lives. But Hoshayahu didn't write it this way. He wrote it like this, Chai Hovah. He dropped one of the yuds in the word, in this phrase, Chai Yehovah. And the only reason he would do that is because he spoke that way. If you're writing it normally, you wouldn't write that way. But he wrote it the way he spoke it. And what's really interesting about this is the way he wrote it, Chai Hovah, isn't proper Hebrew. What he did here is he used a contraction. And in English we have many contractions like can't and won't and things shouldn't, but we also have contractions, and those are proper English. Ancient Hebrew doesn't really have contractions. When an ancient Hebrew used a contraction like this, it's more like when we say in English ain't. Right? What's ain't a contraction for? Am not. I am not. I ain't. Right? That's not proper English. When you hear somebody say that, you say, okay, they don't speak the standard way that we're taught to speak in English. Maybe some of your parents slapped your hand or corrected you. And when somebody says ain't, that's not standard proper English. And when you said Chai Hovah, for as Yehovah lives, that was not proper Hebrew, ancient Hebrew. But it showed that this is how this simple captain who was the commander of this field observation post, that's how he spoke. And he actually spoke the name. I mean, that blows me away, that the faith of an ancient Israelite, of this ancient Judean, is so strong that when he swears, he doesn't say, as the king lives, and he doesn't say, as Baal lives, as many of his brothers and sisters did. He says, as Yehovah lives. And imagine if you were his commander and you read this and it has the equivalent of ain't. And he says, I ain't illiterate. I mean, that would have been funny. But that was the simple faith that this man had. That's how he spoke. He wrote the way he spoke. That's beautiful to me. I'm not going to judge him for not speaking properly. To me, it's a beautiful thing that he's a simple man who speaks the way a normal person would speak, and he speaks the name of the Father. Why does he swear as Yehovah lives? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13. You shall fear the Lord your God, and of course it says Yehovah in the Hebrew with Lord in caps, and serve him, and shall take oaths in his name. And we see 44 times they did it in his name. Again, Deuteronomy 10:20. There's a really interesting end times prophecy related to this. And this says Jeremiah 12:16. It's speaking about the Gentiles. And it says, it shall be if they nevertheless learn the way of my people to swear in my name, as Yehovah lives, Chai Yehovah. Say Chai Yehovah. In the way they taught my people to swear by Baal, say Chai Baal. No, don't say that. Then they shall be built in the midst of my people. This is a promise to the nations. If they learn to swear in the name Yehovah, the way they taught Israel to swear by Baal, they'll be built in the midst of his people. Woo! Now, this is an argument I have with many of my Karaite brothers and sisters and many of my rabbinical brothers and sisters who say, those Gentiles, they're not going to be part of us. They're not going to be, they talk about being grafted in. We're going to have Israelites and Gentiles, and never the twain shall meet. This is an argument I have with many of my Karaite brothers and sisters and rabbinical brothers and sisters. But there's a really interesting passage in Genesis 12, I believe it's verse 3, somewhere around there, where God says to Abraham, he gives him a blessing. And the blessing is, in you shall be blessed all the nations of the earth. And this blessing appears several times. It appears several times to the forefathers. And the interesting thing about that is the word blessed can also mean grafted in. Oh. Woo! And this is how actually the rabbis in the Talmud, some of the rabbis interpreted this, and you will be grafted in all the nations of the earth.